Okay, the book of Revelation, it's a book of sevens, okay? Dr. Henry Morris, by the way, you might know him from the Genesis flood. No, he's written, basically he was the father of the modern creation movement, but not only did he write the Genesis record, but he also wrote the Revelation record too. And he makes a statement in his commentary, which I'll probably quote quite a bit when we get to the judgments, but he makes a statement in his introduction. A unique aspect of the book of Revelation is its remarkable sevenness. In other words, the book is replete with sevens. And I got 24 listed here. There's 7 churches, 7 spirits, 7 candlesticks, 7 stars, 7 lamps, 7 seals, 7 horns, 7 eyes, 7 angels, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders, 7,000, 7 heads, 7 crowns, 7 angels, 7 plagues, 7 vials, 7 mountains, 7 kings, 7 beatitudes. In other words, blessed are you. In other words, using that Greek word makarios. 7 years of judgments, 7 years of judgments. 7 divisions of each letter to the 7 churches. 7 I ams of Christ. By the way, that's if you have the received text and not the modern translations. And 7 doxologies in heaven. In other words, and that's just an example. In other words, the book is written in a Hebrew style, but it's written in the Greek language. But the mindset is Hebrew. So because of that, I will sometimes use Hebrew terms. I'll write Hebrew up there sometimes. I'll write Greek up there, especially when it adds to your understanding of the text. For an example, the only real explanation why people have always followed a 7-day week and why the number 7 has always symbolized fullness and completion is the divine decree of Genesis 2:3. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God had created and made. And once again, in order to understand Revelation, we must return to Genesis. In other words, we get 7 starts off in Genesis. There's no earthly reason for 7 to be an important number, but yet in the scripture it is. And the only basis is in the creation week in Genesis itself.
Wait, I had a question.
Yeah.
Never mind. I don't have a question anymore.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Those are the easiest to answer, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll come back.
We're gonna define the word revelation, and we'll get rid of a few misnomers about the book. Just define the term, and then we're gonna do a bird's eye view of the book of Revelation. I want you to see the whole forest today. We'll go into it in just enough depth. First of all, we'll cover the book of Revelation in about 10 minutes, and then I'll spread it out. In other words, you're seeing it from a big distance, so you can get the whole thing in your head, so that by the time when I start going through it little by little, or in detail, you'll know where we are. And I will require you to be able to graphically put down the entire book of Revelation, everything that happens in it. I will spend time every week. Takes 6 weeks for you to memorize something for the rest of your life. When you leave this class, you will remember the flow of the book of Revelation. You will be seeing it in your sleep. You will remember it for the rest of your life and where everything comes from. I guarantee it. I promise you that. If you do the work, okay? But a lot of it's going to be in class. So, and it'll be public. I'll call on you and I will have quizzes, which if you're a full-time student, it will be graded. So in other words, you will be required to be able to fill in the data. We start off very sparse, but then we start adding detail. I guarantee you at the end of this term, you will know this book backwards and forwards. So let's take a look, first of all, at just what Revelation is itself. It says the revelation of Jesus Christ, Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, just the first 3 words. Apocalypsus Iesu Christou, that's the Greek. Now, that's how Revelation starts. So we might start off with, first we have the term revelation. Revelation. So like what is? It's an English translation of this word right here. Okay, if that's spelled right. Okay. I guess that's right. It's an apocalypse. So you say, well, what's an apocalypse? Well, it's a revelation. Well, let's find out exactly what that means. Strong's Greek dictionary defines an apocalypse as revelation, manifestation, coming, or appearing. Okay, this word is more comprehensive than epiphania. Like you've heard of, like we some churches celebrate the season of Epiphany. Okay, well, Epiphany depicts the progressive and immediate unveiling of the otherwise unknown and unknowable God to his church. Okay? And epiphany means a shining forth. In other words, a shining forth so you can't miss it. As you can possibly miss it, or the glory of Christ, as the lightning cometh from the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, when Christ comes back, you can't miss it. So in other words, there is not a possibility that Christ came and we missed it. He says when he comes, everybody on the face of the earth are going to see it. Can't miss it, okay? That's an epiphany, okay?
Second coming.
Yeah, on the second coming, yeah. And when I go through Revelation, there's some things in prophecy that Revelation just skips over. I will insert those things so you see where they fit in the book and show you why they're there. I wish I could cover Daniel and Zechariah along with this, and Isaiah chapters 24 through 27, but we'll be lucky to get through 22 chapters of Revelation. Okay, so let's take an example here. An example, here's an epiphany, and you've all heard this. It's kind of corny, but it's an accurate description. It said, look, up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? That's an epiphany. So you haven't quite identified it yet, but you see something. That's an epiphany. And then you heard, what's the rest of the phrase? No, it's Superman. That's an apocalypse. That's the difference, okay? That's the most modern example that I could think of, okay? So, uses of apocalypsis, the Greek word is actually apocalypsis. The first mention in the New Testament is Luke 2:32. A light to bring a revelation to the Gentiles. Okay, the first place where it's used in the New Testament, which in turn is a summary statement of Isaiah 9:2, chapter 42. In other words, it's a quote from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew. Paul uses the term most extensively. Paul uses the word apocalypse or revelation 14 times. Okay, eagerly waiting for the revelation of our Lord Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 1:7. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing the apocalypse or the revelation of the sons of God. That's us. In other words, we're part of a revelation also. Romans 8:19. Paul received the gospel by apocalypsis of Jesus Christ. Galatians 1:12. He didn't receive it from any man. He got it by direct revelation from Jesus Christ. Peter uses apocalypsis or revelation 3 times, each time referring to the coming of the Lord. 1 Peter 1:7, verse 13 and 4:13. The Apostle John uses it only 1 time. And of course, the book of Revelation takes its title from that, the revelation of Jesus Christ. The first word in the book of Revelation gives the book its title. So the proper title of the book of Revelation is Revelation, not a lot of people say Revelations. That is absolutely wrong. It is the revelation, singular, not revelations. So to show that your college students and stuff, from now on, start calling it this and not this. Okay. So let's look at the origin and destination of the revelation. This message originated with God the Father to Jesus Christ to show his servants things which shortly must take place. So we have from the Father to Jesus Christ to the angel to John and to us. Okay. Well, by the way, we'll define who the angel is, or whether it's a pastor, whether it's a supernatural angel when we get more into the text itself, but not right now. Okay, so that's what a revelation is. Any questions on that? Okay, what is the title of the last book of the Bible?
Revelation.
What?
Revelation.
Revelation, okay? Or you can say apocalypsis, or you can say apocalypse. By the way, if you have a Catholic Bible, lots of times they'll say apocalypse. The apocalypse of John. Okay, now we are going to take a bird's eye view of the book of Revelation so that when you leave here, I won't give you so much that you don't feel like you need to come, I don't need to come back. I've learned all I need to know. But you'll have a good view of the book by the time we leave tonight. So, before we actually get into chapter 1, we're going to discover that Revelation itself is outlined in the book itself. Okay, in Revelation 1:19. Let me open my Bible here. Probably wondering, how long will it be before he opens his Bible in this class? Okay. No, an hour and a half. Okay, but in Revelation, by the way, this is going to be a key verse. Revelation 1:19. Okay. It says, "Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which will take place after this." So, if you wonder how to outline the book has been outlined for you by the book itself. So there are I have my timeline here. The things that have been. The things that are. You've just outlined the book of Revelation, okay? The things that are, or things that have been, that's chapter 1. It's the glorified Christ. The things which are, that's chapters 2 and 3, and the rest is 4 through 22. Okay. Those are the three major sections of the book. This is about Christ, the church, and the future. Okay. So in other words, in our view, in the premillennial, pre-tribulational view, at the very least, chapters 4 through 22 are future. They have not happened yet. They are sometime in the future, but as every day passes, they get one day closer. So that is the outline of the book. Now let's kind of like break this down in another way. Okay. By the way, if you go to Revelation 1:19, when you leave here, you'll probably never ever forget this. Probably knew it already, but that is the outline for the book. Okay, so now let's go into the book just a little bit deeper. Okay, most people, when they're in Revelation or take a Revelation class, they're mostly interested in Revelation chapters 4 through 22, and especially, say, starting at chapter 6. You know, you get past the heaven part, you know, get past the seven churches and stuff, the church in heaven. But Revelation 6 through 22 is what most most people want to see. They want to hear about the judgments and all that stuff. So, as we look at the book of Revelation, we have John on the Isle of Patmos, and basically we can put a date on this part, okay? So let's say 95 AD. John, you know, being in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, you know, in other words, he's holding a church service. And right there during that church service, by the way, how can he hold a church service if he's the only one? Isn't it where two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am in their midst? So if there's only one, will Christ be there in his midst? Can Christ be in your midst when you're the only one there?
I would say yes.
Okay, why?
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 Because he's omnipresent.
He's omnipresent, okay. By the way, most people when they say, typically you'll hear, for where two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am in their midst. And they say, well, that's where, you know, as you're agreeing for something on prayer or something like that. Biblically, it's a poor interpretation. It has nothing whatsoever to do with that. Nothing whatsoever to do with the church service. It has to do with church discipline. In other words, when a group of elders or something like that, they're deciding on a course of action for a wayward member in the church, where two or three are gathered together in my name. In other words, and they're following the scriptures, say in Matthew chapter 18 on church discipline, Christ says, I am there in their midst, endorsing everything that they're saying. That's what it actually means. It has nothing to do with, well, like if Kenny's off by himself, well, I can't do church because I'm the only one here and Christ won't show up. So it's not true. Yeah, it's a poor hermeneutic. So John is by himself, and you know, suddenly, you know, he's in the Spirit, and he gets a revelation, you know, from the angel, and actually he's going to turn. He's actually going to see Jesus Christ himself. Okay, and we're going to not talk about the glorified Christ right now, but let's just say that when John turns, you know, he sees Christ. He hears a voice as of a trumpet, in other words, a finely tuned staccato voice where he knows exactly what's being said, he knows it's being called, and then when he turns around and sees, basically he falls flat on his face. Okay. People that have said that they've gone to heaven and stuff like that, modern versions and stuff like that, you read any account in the Old Testament or the New Testament, when people have an encounter with Jesus Christ or they have a trip to heaven in Scripture, they fall flat on their face and there's no strength in them. And virtually every picture you see in the Scripture, they're always in the throne room of God. In other words, they're going to literally see the throne of God. Or when they see a vision of God, tremendous fear, okay, whether you're talking about Daniel or whether you're talking about Ezekiel or whether you're talking about John the Apostle, there's tremendous fear and they have to be basically revived from that. So he has a vision of the glorified Christ, and this is going to be Christ not as we saw him on the earth. It's not going to be the pre-incarnate Christ where he's the angel of Jehovah, but this is Christ in his glory, that John sees, okay? And he's described as having a voice like a trumpet and a voice that sounds like many waters, okay? In other words, carrying the authority and the power, the omnipotence of God. In other words, the Christ that he sees is totally different than the Christ that he was familiar with on the earth, okay? So that's what he sees, and Christ is going to give him a picture. By the way, with Christ and the vision of Christ, the revealing of Christ there, that's the things that were, okay? When we get to the things that, okay, to put was, let's see. Christ, okay, and then is, okay. Was, is, and will be, Revelation 1:19. We're going to have Revelations 2 and 3. And I'll talk about this in some detail later on, but many Bible expositors talk about the 7 churches. By the way, you'll be required to know who the 7 churches, knowing what they are, a little bit about them, but we're not going to focus a whole lot on them. But you got to realize that a lot of Bible scholars tend to agree, not all of them, but a good many of them, and I'll present opposing opinions for and against, that the 7 churches basically is a synopsis of church history from the 1st century to all the way to the rapture of the church. I will present scholars that you know and love, all from our position. Some say that's true, and some say no, it's not. But at least you'll get to see, why they hold the opinion that they do. But anyway, as you go through the 7 churches, what you're going to notice is that the church starts off very godly. It starts off very fundamental, very doctrine-oriented. By the time you get to the 7th church, you're going to notice, for the most part, that as you go through the 7 churches, they start off on a very high plateau, and by the time the church age is done, they're pretty much like Christ pictures himself as standing outside. Can I come in? Okay, basically that's how the church age ends. By the way, we use that in witnessing a lot. If you do the Roman road, they have that one road in Revelation, that one verse in Revelation in the Roman road. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door, I will come in and sup with him and he with me. We have that verse that we use, but has nothing to do with the individual. It has everything to do with Christ asking to come into the church. In other words, he's being excluded from the church, and he's knocking, saying, "Can I come in?" Okay, but you'll notice that progression, and we'll talk about that. But just know that it starts off very high, and it ends up in a state of apostasy. That's how the church age ends. In other words, Christ says, when I return to the earth, will I find the faith? And of course, when a Jewish question, when he asks a question, no. Says the faith is going to be mainly absent, except for a remnant who still believe. So the church age kind of like ends in apostasy, but there's always that believing remnant, okay? And at that point right there, at the end of the church age, we now go unto things which shall be. Okay. The rest of the book. So if I was going to draw this pictorially at that point, okay, a lot of commentators believe that, at the very, very first verse of Revelation chapter 4, where John hears, "Come up here," that's a picture of the rapture. Some expositors say yes, some say no. But anyway, at that time, at that point, now the church is in heaven. And that's chapters 4 and 5. And when the church is in heaven, immediately you're in the throne room of God. So now with the church in heaven, by the way, in Revelation 2 and 3, 7 times the text is going to say, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." After chapter 3, the church is mysteriously absent until chapter 19, just not there. There's arguments, depending upon your different views, whether the church is up here or not. But of course, in our view, of course, that's going to be, the church is up there in heaven at that point. The church has been raptured. The text does not say that, but other prophetic biblical books do, like 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 through 18. they make the statement that this is where the church is now. Okay, so now the church is in heaven, in the throne room of God. Yeah.
I was going to say, the book becomes very, very Jewish after that point, all the idioms and everything.
Actually, they're quite Jewish here too, because the seven churches, remember that first 100 years, most people in the church were Jewish.
No, but I mean the titles that for Christ, for instance, and then the titles after that, you seem to be more.
Yeah, but I would argue even in chapters 2 and 3 and chapter 1, they're very Jewish too. I will demonstrate that as we go through it. We're going to discover this is a very Jewish book all the way through.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
Yeah, we'll definitely see, and I understand your point. There's going to be a large emphasis on David, on Jesus being the root and the offspring of David, the son of David, the son of man. In other words, terms that we Gentile Christians we don't typically use unless you're in a Messianic congregation or something like that. So the church is in heaven, and it's at that point in chapter 5. Oh, by the way, there's going to be 24 elders, okay? The Greek word for elder is presbyteros. We get our word Presbyterian. This is where you throw in a joke, of course, wake everybody up. This demonstrates that the only people that will be in heaven will be Presbyterians. It's just because of the word elder. The Presbyterians are going to occupy the 24 thrones. Okay. Some Bible expositors say it's because the dead in Christ rise first. Okay, that's why. Okay. And there's always comebacks and everything. Anyway, presbyteros, whether you say episkopos or presbyteros, they both mean elder, leader, bishop. They're basically synonyms. They mean the same thing. But literally, in other words, you'll discover, and we'll demonstrate this, that 24 is the number for the church. So I'm just going to say outright, without proving it anything, that those 24 thrones represent the church, not 12 for Israel and 12 for the church. All 24 represent the church, because the church has been removed from the earth. Okay, so that's at that point right there, chapters 4 and 5. In chapter 5, the scroll is going to be introduced. Who's going to be worthy to open a seven-sealed scroll? Seven-sealed scroll basically is a title deed or a will. They were in Roman Empire. They basically had 7 seals, and you had to have the proper authority in order to open the seals. So there's a search made in heaven and earth to see if there's anybody worthy to open the seal, and of course, John starts crying, weeping uncontrollably when he discovers nobody's been found that can open the 7-sealed scroll. And then he says, oh, don't worry, John, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which Kenny is wearing there, okay? Lion of the tribe of Judah, he is worthy, okay? So out from the throne, okay, out from the throne walks a lamb as if it had been slain. So it announces the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and out walks a lamb. Okay, and this particular lamb had 7 eyes, 7 horns. In other words, all wisdom, all power. Horns is a symbol for power, especially political power. Eyes, wisdom, all seeing. 7 being the number for completeness or perfection. I mean, it actually means both. 3 and 7 actually mean the same thing in Scripture: completeness and perfection. So, in other words, he's got the Spirit, the perfect, the sevenfold Spirit. He's got all power and all wisdom. In other words, he's demonstrating that he's omnipotent, but yet he was dead and came alive. So in other words, it even talks about resurrection. He is worthy to open the scroll, and once that is open, heaven rejoices. But on the earth, it's business as usual until they're ready to open the scroll. Okay. Now we're going to look at this scroll. I'm going to erase this part right here, and we're just going to look at this right here. So the Lamb has the scroll. In other words, Jesus Christ has the scroll. He is in the process now of, he has the title deed for planet Earth, and he is going to reclaim it. And as we talk about, when we bring up Old Testament references, we'll talk about, say, why the deed was lost and all that stuff. We'll just allude to that. But if you take the Old Testament survey class, you'll really find out, like in depth, the flow of the Old Testament, what's going on here. In other words, there's going to be a fulfillment of hundreds of Old Testament prophecies that's going to talk about the reclamation of planet Earth. And Christ is going to reclaim the earth with that title deed. But in that title deed, there's going to be judgments that are going to occur on the earth first. So there's from chapter 6 all the way through chapter 16, 6 through 16, we're going to have the opening of this 7-sealed scroll, okay? But in chapter 6, we're going to open the first 6 seals. So in other words, it's just really quick, okay? It's just like a staccato opening. In other words, there's just judgments falling one right after the other. Before I open that seal, though, I'm going to give you the flow of the book first, okay? So at this point right here, okay, we'll make it from Revelation 6 through 16 is all the way to here. Well, I'll say through 19, all the way through here. This is Revelation 6 through all the way through the second coming of Christ, right here. Right smack dab in the middle is going to be what we call the abomination of desolation. Okay. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about what the judgments are. I'm just going to say that there are judgments. All you got to know right now is that as the judgments unfold, we're going to look at how they unfold, okay? Not what they are, but how they actually unfold, okay? Depending upon the commentator that you read, this is going to look different. So I'm using John MacArthur's. I really believe that he defends his view better than almost any others I've seen. He doesn't go on gut feelings and stuff. He goes just strictly by the scripture, what the scripture states. And we'll spend a little bit of time in the Old Testament as we, in order to substantiate this view, the view that I'm going to teach, that he presents, we'll talk a lot later on about the day of the Lord. Day of the Lord, day of Jehovah. Okay. When you see Lord in all capitals, that means Jehovah, or Yahweh, or Yahweh. Okay. If you speak modern Hebrew, it's Yahweh with a V. There's no W in modern Hebrew. We like to say Yahweh. We sing that song Yahweh, Yahweh. But if you were in Israel, they would say Yahweh, Yahweh. Okay. No W's in modern Hebrew. The day of Jehovah, okay, will define when the events actually take place here. So you got to go to the Old Testament and find, what does the day of the Lord look like? And then once you know what the day of the Lord looks like, you can actually determine, when does the day of the Lord actually start? Does it start here or here? Where does it start? And you'll discover it starts right here.
Is it Joel's Day of the Lord?
Joel and Zephaniah probably have the most references to the day of Jehovah. Okay, the events that they describe, like for instance, the sun turning dark as sackcloth, the moon turning red, the color red and stuff. The way Zephaniah and Joel describe it, and that's just 2 prophetic books. There's like 25 references to the day of the Lord. When you look at what the day of the Lord looks like, then you'll get a picture, an idea. Well, when does it start actually when does it actually start in this 7-year period. And I will argue that it starts right here. It's actually going to start with the sixth seal, not the first, not the second, not the third, but the sixth. So during this stretch right here in the first 3.5 years, there's going to be seals. One, two, three, 4, 5. The fifth seal is going to be open, but the fifth seal is going to encompass seal number 4. It's going to encompass the entire 7 years. But most people, when the fifth seal is open, they don't say, well, the martyrs. Why is that a judgment? Well, it's not the people being martyred during this period. It's their prayer. It's God answering the prayer that they pray. How long, O Lord, will you remain and not judge the people who killed us? And God says, wait a little while, and there will be a certain time when I do answer it. And of course, he's going to answer it here. He's going to specifically take their prayer and answer it over here. Okay, but the martyrs are being killed during that entire time. He says, wait for your number to be complete. But during that time, the prayer will be answered in this time right here. And then during the seal number 6, pick a color I haven't picked yet here. Just so I have room to put it here, here's seal number 6. Right up here in the middle here, basically that starts when you look at the physical disturbances, the cosmic disturbances that happen in the heavens, the earthquake that happens on the earth, you will discover that seal number 6 and the day of the Lord have the same description. And so you'll see that starting right here. Basically, for the last 3.5 years of what Jesus himself defines this last 3.5 year period as great tribulation. Matthew 24, 15, 24, 21. He labels that as the great tribulation, which is also synonymous with the day of the Lord. So, well, what about all these seals right here? Well, look at Matthew chapter 24. You will discover that Matthew chapter 24 is a Reader's Digest version of these, which of course will put you at odds with some Bible expositors, because they're going to want to put, there will be wars and rumors of wars, there will be earthquakes and divers, in various places, all those, false Christs, false prophets. They're going to want to put those out here. It's what we're looking for right now. That's going to precipitate this, when in reality Jesus is talking about this. Because if you look at Matthew chapter 24, it is a commentary. It's a 1-chapter commentary on Revelation chapter 6 through 19. And then he in chapter 25, at the end of 24, and Matthew chapter 25, he explains through the different parables why that's so. Okay, and I will cross-reference so that you can actually see it. Because by the way, you'll have this memorized.
I've heard people argue that the whole tribulation is the whole 7 years, and I know it's Daniel's 7 years, but I agree. I think Christ specifically, that's when the great tribulation begins. That 3.5 years.
You can legitimately call this period the tribulation period, Daniel's 70th week, the time of Jacob's trouble. You can, and by the way, we'll give verses for all those which you will be. You don't have to memorize the verse, but you do have to memorize the reference, and it'll be on your every quiz. As we start adding detail and stuff, you will get more and more and more information. But when I give you the big picture, it's going to be pretty empty. There's just going to be the things that were, the things that are, and the things which will be. Maybe on the first quiz, well, you just got to be able to divide this line in 3 sections. You got it. Got 100% on the quiz. And then we just start filling in information. But you notice as we go along, it's all memorized. So that by the time this thing is full, I mean, this thing's going to be full, and like maybe lots of different colors and stuff on how you might do it to remember it. You will know the book from cover to cover and know where everything goes and know why it goes there. In other words, you won't put it there just because I said it goes there or MacArthur says it goes there. You will be able to go to scripture and verse and say, well, here's why I believe what it is. In other words, you will be able to defend the view that you have, and like say somebody might say something else, a different position, you'll say, well, no, that contradicts this particular verse. You'll be able to do that. I mean, just as we're going through this, I guarantee you every single one of you will be able to do this. I won't leave anybody behind. Everybody will know. You'll know this book backwards and forwards. So, the sixth seal happens here. Now we're at the end of chapter 6 in the book of Revelation, and then we're going to, chapter 7, we're going to have a meanwhile back at the ranch. That's what Hal Lindsey used to say it. Meanwhile back at the ranch. In other words, in the meantime, what's going on everywhere else? And it's going to kind of like take you back to the beginning, and you're going to discover that God is going to choose and seal 144,000 Jews. In other words, 144,000 Israelites, 12,000 from each tribe, excluding, of course, the tribe of Dan. In other words, sometimes the tribes, there will be different names in the tribes. Dan is excluded in this. Nobody knows why. There's theories, but it's very difficult to prove. But you can give reasonable explanations. But 12,000 Jews will be chosen from each tribe. So most of the church, when they say Israel has inherited the curses, God is through with Israel, Revelation says, no, I'm not. So I like to use the question, if God were going to say that he was not through with Israel, or if we look at Revelation chapter 7, what would God have to say in order to convince you that he was sealing 144,000 Jewish people, Jewish men? What words would God have to use to tell you that he was sealing Jewish men? Well, he would have to outright say they were Jews. Well, it says it here, like in verses 5 through 8, it says he seals 12,000, and then he goes through Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Going through 12 tribes. But when he gives a name for a tribe, it says 12,000 were sealed. Zebulun, out of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Out of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed, for a total of 144,000. Okay, what words could God possibly use to tell you that they were Jewish people? Well, unfortunately, most of the church says, well, that's symbolic language. It doesn't really mean Jewish people. Well, now, of course, when you use allegory, well, what does it mean? Well, it depends upon what interpreter you look at. They make it mean whatever they want it to mean. The different facets of the church age or something like that, but it has but nothing to do with the text itself. So anyway, it says during that interlude time in chapter 7, God is going to seal 7,000. Okay, in other words, he's going to hold back the judgments for a little while, and he's letting you know what he's doing in the background. He's sealing. In other words, they're going to become indestructible during that 7-year period, and he's going to set them aside so that they can preach the gospel over the entire face of the earth in 7 years. They will be indestructible. Antichrist will go after them, and he will not kill a single one of them. Not one. All 144,000 survive. In a period where 2 out of 3 people are going to die. 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4 people in the tribulation, Great Tribulation, are going to die on the face of the earth. In other words, with a population of 6.5 billion people today, there's only going to be about 1.5 billion people left on the earth. Everybody else is going to die. Okay, but out of those 144,000 Jews, every single one of them survive that are sealed. Okay, So God seals them, okay? And so that's that interlude chapter, and meanwhile back at the ranch. Now we get back to chapters 8 and 9, and now God is going to open the seventh seal. So seal number 7, happening right here. You're just pretty close to the abomination of desolation here. I'll come back to this in a second. Seal number 7 is going to be open, and when the 7th seal is open, it's going to introduce the 7 trumpet judgments of Revelations chapter 8 and 9. And they're often called, at least the first 4 are called the judgment of the thirds, because it's going to be a third of all the fresh water will be undrinkable. A third of the ocean will be killed. In other words, will die. A third of the trees on the planet Earth will be destroyed and burned up. In other words, it's the judgment of the thirds. The judgment of the interstellar heavens, the starlight, the sunlight, the moonlight, will be cut by a third. Okay, different interpretations on what that actually means, and I take a very supernatural view, because it's at that point when God is judging the heavens, men can no longer say it's not God doing it. I mean, there is no doubt that God is doing it. And they literally turn their rage against God at that point, where they realize that he's judging the heavens themselves. God is literally going to turn down the light, but turn up the heat. He's going to make it hotter and less bright at the same time. So that happens with the 7th seal. But when we get down to after chapter 9, and then all the way in chapter 11, we finally get to the 7th trumpet in chapter 11. Chapter 11, when the 7th trumpet, or if I want to do it, what the book would actually say, it's a shofar. You all know what a ram's horn is. I got a couple, I'll bring some in, show what it's not the golden or the silver trumpets, it's a shofar. There's no man-made instruments in heaven. In other words, they're nothing man-made. It's all, the only thing man-made in heaven is the scars on Jesus. Everything else is, God produces himself. So it's 7 shofar, 7 shofar judgments. But on the 7th shofar, what we say, we like to say trumpet. During that 7th trumpet, when that is blown, of course, there's going to be another earthquake. And at that point, the 7 bowl judgments are going to occur. And the 7 bowls, that's like if you have like a saucer. It's not like a vial. Some translations say it's a vial, like you think like a test tube or something like that. But it's really like an incense plate, or a very shallow bowl. In other words, not much different than just a small cup that your coffee would, a coffee cup holder, the saucer for it. Very shallow, and there's going to be 7 of those. So we have the 7 bowl judgments. In Revelation chapter 14 and 15, we have the prelude of what's going on in heaven, describing how God is getting ready to do that, because now the judgments are almost going to be over. And at that point right there, of course they're very shallow, because basically when the angels come out and dispense them one at a time, basically, because it's very shallow, it's nothing that's being poured out, it's being like tossed out. I mean, it's right on the surface. You'd look at a plate and you fill it full of water, and you just shake it, all the contents fall down. Well, all the contents of these bowls will be dispensed with, bowls 1 through 7, one at a time. And at that point, we're basically sitting right here. We're right at the end of the 7-year period. Here's the bowls right here. In other words, mankind cannot survive after these bowls are poured. If the conditions stayed that way, it would kill everybody on the earth. Everybody would die. Because when these bowls are poured, there will be no fresh water. The oceans will be 100% dead. Every living thing in the ocean will be dead. In other words, the ocean will be completely lifeless. Not even a protozoa, nothing. God is going to completely sterilize it, kill it. No fresh water. God literally going to turn off the sun for a while, and then he's going to turn up the heat. He's going to send boils on people so that they're suffering. There's no water to drink. They're in darkness. I mean, it's going to be utterly horrible during this time right here. And it's at this point right here that Christ is getting ready to come back. Use a different color here. Right at this point right here. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. In other words, right here at the end of the 7-year period, we have the second coming. Revelation chapter 19. Okay. So let's kind of leave Christ, not just Christ, but us. We'll be riding back on mighty steeds ourselves. I always tell people, when I teach a Hebrew class or something like that, I always say, I teach a Hebrew class because there's 2 things you need when you go to heaven. You gotta be an equestrian, you gotta be able to ride a horse, and you gotta be able to speak the pure language, which arguably is the Hebrew language. Okay. So that's why I teach a Hebrew. It's a joke, of course, but every once in a while I do have equestrian, people that really are good. They're really good at riding horses and stuff, and they're ready. They're taking Hebrew, and oh, by the way, I can ride too, because we will be coming back on white horses ourselves. Okay, not that we're not going to do any fighting. We're the rooting section, but we'll be coming back at this point here. So that's in Revelation chapter 19. There's a whole lot that all that destruction has happened, mostly right here with the trumpets and the bowls. Okay. Okay, there's some other meanwhile chapters here too. In chapter 10. There's going to be a mighty angel that's going to come down to the earth. Some commentators will say this mighty angel because he has a little book that he makes John eat. He says, "You eat this now." Okay, it doesn't say that in the Greek, but that's paraphrase. So John has to eat this book, and it's basically it's a picture where he's eating the title deed to the earth. And this angel is claiming planet Earth for Christ. He's a really big angel. Remember Oral Roberts had that vision of the 500-foot Jesus? Which, well, anyway, this angel may very well be like 500 feet. But then I always thought, he could be just 7 feet or 6 feet. And you go down on the beach or something like that, put one foot in the water and one on the land. And you're essentially doing the same thing. But this is a mighty angel, and he represents Jesus Christ, okay? And when we get to there, I'll show you why he is not Jesus Christ. But anyway, he's going to claim planet Earth on behalf of the Messiah. And the way I like to describe it is, he is going to close escrow. In other words, the title deed belongs to Jesus, but now he's coming down to claim the property. And he's sent his messenger in order to let everybody know that this is going to happen. And it's going to happen very soon. Okay. One thing else I didn't mention, on the last 3 trumpets, trumpets 5, 6, and 7, those are also called the 3 woes. Okay, W-O-E. Okay. An angel in heaven goes, "Woe. Whoa, whoa." That means that there's going to be a horrible judgment that's going to occur almost immediately. Okay. So in other words, he's warning of 3 tremendous judgments, basically the 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets. And of course, when you look at the 7th trumpet is the 7 bowl judgments. And it's the worst of all. That's the 3rd woe. So you have this angel claiming planet Earth. Meanwhile, there's something else going on too. There's 2 witnesses that God sends on the earth. Many claim to be Moses and Elijah. Some commentators argue that the 2 witnesses are here in the first half. Some commentators argue that they're in the second half. So we will look at arguments. By the way, this is arguments among people that hold our view. They say, are they here or are they here? First half or second half. We'll look at arguments and different scholars. Who holds this view and why? Who holds this view and why? And then, of course, we'll look at who are they? And what's the evidence for who they are? Is it John the Baptist? Is it Enoch? Is it Moses? Is it Elijah? Or as Robert Newell says, he says, I don't know who they are. You know, a lot of commentators say, who knows? You know, because they're not identified by name. So we'll look at the evidence, you know, for the two witnesses in chapter 11. They're going to be the nemesis of the Antichrist and the false prophet, because they will be indestructible for 3.5 years. And when the Antichrist finally has them put to death and they are killed, they will literally lay in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days, and on World Wide Web, worldwide television, satellite communications, the whole world will view their rotting corpses in the street as they hold like a satanic Christmas where everybody's exchanging gifts, because these two guys are dead and they're celebrating their death, watching them on TV as they rot, as they pass presents out to each other.
CNN.
Yeah, and then God is literally going to raise them from the dead on on international television. In other words, if you have your iPod or something like that, you know, you're looking at that, your program will be preempted, your game will be turned off, and that's what you're going to see if you're, say, left here on the earth. So that's something that happens in chapter 11 and is described. And of course, we got to figure out, how does all this fit together? But then the biggest thing we got to look at then is in Revelation chapter 12. We have to look at the abomination of desolation. So as we look at that, the beginning of what Jesus says is great tribulation. Remember, he says in Daniel, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the wilderness. And then verse 21, Matthew 24, verse 21, says, then there shall be great tribulation. And memory says, and if those days had not been cut short, no flesh would be saved. So in other words, describing that period, great tribulation, i.e. the day of the Lord during that time right here. Well, what is the abomination of desolation? We'll describe that, and we'll look at the passages for that Old Testament and New Testament. And what we're going to discover is that Satan is a man is going to be raised up, whether he is 100% human or whether he is a Nephilim. We'll look at both theories, okay? Whether he's really, literally Satan's seed. In other words, Satan fathered this child with a human mother. In other words, making him half angel, a Nephilim. We'll look at the evidence for that. And then we'll look at the evidence, well, is he just a man who's demon-possessed by a very powerful demon or by Satan himself? We'll look at that. But the abomination of desolation basically is he's going to step into the rebuilt temple of God at this point right here, after making a 7-year peace treaty with Israel, okay? Makes a covenant or a mutual defense pact for 7 years. In the middle of that, in the midst of it, he breaks the peace. He goes into the temple and says, I am God, worship me. And it's at that point, Jesus says, when you see that, he tells the Jews who are in Israel at that time, flee to the hills. If you're on your housetop, don't even go down in your house to get your coat. He says, woe to you if you're pregnant in those days or if you're nursing a child, because you're not going to make it. You'll get caught and you'll get killed. In other words, it's going to be a horrible time, okay? So at this point right here, if we look at chapter 12, you're going to discover, and I've already thrown a lot of stuff in here now, stuff's going on in heaven while it's happening on earth too. There's a battle going on in heaven, and right at the midpoint of this 7-year period, Michael and his angels make war with the dragon, Satan, and he is removed from the premises of heaven. He and all the fallen angels with him are removed from heaven, and the doors are barred. He is no longer allowed access to the heavenlies like he has right now. So he is cast out, and at that point he's on the earth. Satan knows he only has 3.5 years. So he's got to do everything he can to keep Christ from coming back. And he does that in a 3-pronged attack. He tries to prevent this. He tries to prevent Christ and us coming back at the Battle of Armageddon. That's why all the world's forces are there waiting to try to repel an invasion from outer space. And then at the same time, he's trying to destroy all the Jews that are alive on the earth. In other words, Christ cannot come back and rule a kingdom from Jerusalem and Israel if there are no Jews left on the earth. Okay, so we'll look at the mystery of anti-Semitism and all that. But all that happens right here, and we start seeing the spiritual reason what's driving Satan to do what he is doing at this point right here. And we get that in chapter 12. He tells us basically from all the way from the beginning of the creation all the way up to the present, what is driving Satan to do what he does. Okay, and we find out the mystery of what he does, the mystery of Israel, the mystery of the offspring of Israel, the Messiah. We look at all of that, and then we will see how God is going to take care of Satan at this point right here. Chapter 13 of Revelation, we're going to take a bird's eye view, in other words, a closer look at the person that John, at least in 1 John and 2 John, calls him the Antichrist. The only place where those terms are used, some 25 titles for what we call him the Antichrist, but John doesn't use that term. He calls him the beast in Revelation. The beast and the false prophet. We like to call him the Antichrist, but John calls him like a savage beast, a therion, a savage beast. So he describes him in Revelation verses 1 through 10, and then the last eight verses, he's going to describe his henchman, the false prophet, that's going to convince the world to worship the person that's going to be this world leader who Satan will energize to literally run the world at this point right here, to oppose this right here. That's chapter 13. When we get up to chapter 17 and 18, meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're going to go all the way back to the Tower of Babel and go all the way to the future to look at what God is doing with Babylon. Starts off in Genesis chapter 10 and 11 with Nimrod establishing a worldwide religion based on, in other words, commerce, politics, and religion all wrapped up together. Same thing that's going to be happening right here. And we're going to see that, how God orchestrates that and how God is going to rebuild Babylon, get all the forces, all the evil forces back there in Babylon, and then judge it where it started. In other words, where the rebellion started after Noah's flood, God's going to destroy all the false religion in Babylon. So that's Revelation chapter 17 and 18. But it shows how the Antichrist and false religion are united. False religion is like a harlot, a wicked harlot, the mother of all harlots, riding a beast, which is the kingdom, the world empire in that day, but it's also the Antichrist himself. And we're going to look at that so that you will know the difference between the dragon who has 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns on the 7 heads, the Antichrist who's a composite beast that looks like he's described as part leopard, part bear, part lion, 7 heads and 10 horns with 10 crowns on the 10 horns. In other words, not 7 crowns, but 10 crowns. That'll be the Antichrist. Then we'll look at the beast in Revelation 17 who has 7 heads and 10 horns, no crowns. What's the difference? Okay, you'll be able to tell all those apart, tying that with the book of Daniel when he describes the 4th beast in his empires. You will be able to put all of that together here, okay? And let's take a break. And then we'll talk about this and the rest. Okay, 10 minutes.